Welcome to Feldy. Now get your butt out there and start farming.
Yes, sir. Welcome back to Feldy, everybody. Map created by Farmer Yep, whose voice you just heard. And we are enjoying it, even though it's on the old days of Farm Sim 11. You know, maybe I should go straight to my tractor with the cultivator. Get this puppy going again. Let me see here. I'm going to clear out his course. He's headed reasonably in the right direction. Where is he? He was best right at the beginning. There, that's pretty close. Higher. Alright. We'll leave him be. Now we'll head over to harvest potatoes. Where's my lizard set? Get him all set up. Oh yes, I am full. So let me go take of the bounty. I'm gonna have to run this thing quite a bit more than I did in the past because we're actually gonna have a decent crop profit here. Now, what was the key? X. Okay. There we go. Let me put out my handy markers. Is anybody watching this? Have you run this thing? And if you have, how do you do it? I imagine somebody somewhere is probably taken this mod to Farm Sim 22 and even other versions. And maybe now with, maybe they just use the GPS mod to help keep it straight. Here, let me pull that off. If I'm doing the outer edge, I can probably manage that. Yeah, I can't even manage that. Look at that. I got this stuff along the edge. Okay, everybody hold your nose because I'm going to plow into these trees. Alright, let me put them on. I don't care if it looks funny. I guess what I like about them is you can point them ahead and it's kinda like a GPS. You hold your nose. Yeah, these trees don't really help. Just enough stretched out that I can kind of hold it and take a decent path. How would you do it? I mean, I had to basically add a script to try to help myself out. You can just toggle these things off and on. Wouldn't even work in multiplayer. Not that it needs to. Anyway, maybe I can start trying to do this somewhat right by going boom, there, hit another tree. Some of these old tractors here were slow turning around. Once you caught them going, they would move. But until then, they kind of putzed. But yeah, see, I'm already 30% full. So by the time I get around, I may have enough to fill the trailer over there and haul it off to market. And it's going to be gravy money because I'm already out of debt, I think. Yeah, I rounded this off. Yeah, there, I missed a plant. But in the last episode, which was just before this, there's been some where I've done some work, kind of off cam, if you will. And even not quite full. But this one here I opted just to start up back to back. I was showing some of the changes that I'd made in the map, and I don't think I'm alone. You know, I talked to another friend of mine who also does the same things to the map. You know, he says, I think the comment he made was that he can't stand that 10,000 other people are playing the same map as he is, and that it's all the same. So what he likes to do, he said, I think he just said, make it his own. And maybe all of us do that. I don't know how many players there are, you know, that mod the map as they play it, and you don't have to have much modding skill really to do that. And I can't remember if we've talked about it in here before or not, but everybody starts, you know, from somewhere in learning to mod. And sometimes it's as simple as learning how to, you know, make tweaks on the map or some other mod that you're using. You just pop the thing open and start messing with it. Assuming you're playing on a PC, that is. Console players, unfortunately, aren't able to do that. But I'm sure we're not the only ones that do that. And you know, the giants themselves have really helped so that at least when it comes to mapping, there's a lot of changes anymore, you know, that a player can make just in game, you know, if they want to change something, whether it's terraforming the ground or adding and replacing buildings. You know, there's a lot of things that we can do now in the game, and the more recent versions of the game that we never could do back here, you know, in Farm Sim 11 or even Farm Sim 19 was really only the earliest forms of that. Probably the last version where you were really wholly dependent on the editor was Farm Sim 17. So anymore, a lot of that could simply be done in game. But you know, I'm kind of old school in that I like playing a map where I get to see the mapper's vision and how they implemented it. You know, it's I don't think I would enjoy playing a map that was just an open sandbox, you know, where you could do anything you wanted to it. I know that maybe seems counterintuitive, you know, because if it's sandbox, you know, you could make it exactly how you wanted it. There's a whole lot of flexibility. But I don't know. I think there's I really like maps, you know, that are based maybe on a real life location, or even if it's fictional, like Feldy is. At least so far as I'm aware, I don't think it's based on a literal area. Woo, I'm full. But it has the look and feel of a real place. You know, and if you just start off, you know, with a whole bunch of trees and flat landscape, and you can build your own, well, that's kind of a certain style of play, and it's cool in its own right. But I don't know. I guess I'm just old school. I like seeing the creativity of a particular mapper and kind of how they prepared things. And let's see, is that full? Here's my pokies out there. Maybe I can haul this to market. Yeah, it's only 94%. Alright, don't anybody look. Nobody look. Nothing to see here. Boom. we went through the fence. This is so convenient. That's why I put the potatoes down here, is because we're right next to this selling point. But it is seriously difficult, even in the new version, to create a map. And a friend of mine and I were talking about this too. You know, I think it takes a special breed of cat to create a map, or really any mod. But when you look at all this in here, I mean, just right here with what we can see are literally hundreds of objects. Well, maybe not hundreds, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was 100. Each of these trees is an object, so there's several of them here. Each section of fence is an object. This grate and the thing going around it here is an object. Each one of these tables are probably multiple objects. Some of these houses are probably in more than one part. This road is an object. Multiple objects. You know, there's another building up here, and so forth and so on. And each one of these is a specific model that the mapper had to place and put on the map exactly where it's currently sitting. Not to mention, also had to put down the gravel and the grass and all these other textures, you know, that we see, or these other kinds of trees up here. This purple, I don't know what that is. Must be something that grows in Scotland. So not only do they have to place all these objects, they place all these colors in here that we see too, including the rock in the foreground. And you may say, well, big deal, you know, that's just something you gotta do, and that's true. But that's one area, one tiny area of the map. You know, the mapper has to do this over the entire map, multiple areas, has to keep it fresh, looking good, looking realistic. I mean, here's roads. Each one of these is a section. That's more objects to place. And the list just goes on and on and on in terms of the details, you know, that are required to maintain. And there are some guys out there who try to help app modders in particular. You know, they may have a sample app or whatever they call it, you know, that has like a whole bunch of crops installed in it, and just has maybe all the base game objects that are all ready to go, and they're sitting in the app already. They don't need to be imported, and all the mapper has to do is, you know, put them somewhere, right? But it still takes a ton of effort to do that, and each mapper generally is going to want to be unique. So a lot of times they will have their own objects, and some of these mappers are very talented fellas, you know, where they're pretty handy with Blender or some other software to create, you know, their own 3D objects. And for those that aren't, you know, they may be downloading objects off the internet. That's what's called prefab, if you will. I know the Giants Mod Hub has a lot of that, where guys create assets, if you will, that a mapper can put into their maps. And all of this, of course, takes time to go find, to download it, to put it in your map folders, and then to import the objects onto the map. This takes a ton of time, particularly because if you're going to use someone's object that they created, you know, according to kind of the rules of modding and politeness, you know, you need to give proper attribution to the people whose objects you used. And keeping track of all that can be a total record-keeping nightmare. Now, you don't have to give attribution, I don't think, to the Giants. You know, if you're just using their objects, I think you can, those are all fair game. You don't have to think too hard at it. Although it's still classy, really, if mapper also attributes it to Giants, you know, where that's appropriate. And sometimes, you know, when you look at the list of credits for a map mod, you know, some guys are pretty detailed, and then others are a little more lackadaisical about it. But really, to be a pro at it, there's a whole lot of details that a mapper needs to manage. And I guess to me, it just flat out would get exhausting. You know, just to try to keep track of all that, plus to muster up enough creative energy to do something with all that stuff. You know, I've never made my own map. I told a friend of mine here recently that I personally don't think I'm creative enough to do it. Where I will do stuff is I will build off of what someone else has done. I mean, like this map here is kind of a case in point. You know, it's Farmer Yip's map. He had the original vision. He put it all together, made it look the way it looks, and it's way easier for someone like me to come in and build on top of what he did than it would be for someone like me to try to come up with it from scratch. And it's just, I just may not be that creative of a person. That may not be how my mind is oriented. But all I know is it's far easier to just modify what someone else did. And, I used to have a farm sim playing partner. I played on his server a number of times. I think this was in the days of Farm Sim 15. And we did a little in 17 and also 19. It was a lot of fun. And he had, like I say, his own server, which was pretty cool, so dedicated, and only he and I, and there was like one other person I think that played that could get on there, so it was a mature server, if you will, for just a couple of us. But he was heavily modding all the maps, that we would play. And at the time, I really didn't know how to do any of it. One of the first things that I learned, I just remember being very excited, when he was putting additional crops, into the map, which to him was kind of old hat, because he had done it so many times. But for me, it was brand new. All I knew at the time was the standard map and the fruits, that came in it. And the idea that, oh my, we could have sunflowers in there, that we could have soybeans, that we could have any crop we wanted, if you plugged it in. And so I remember that was one of the first things, I learned how to do for modding, was how to install a new crop. And just learning how to do it. But this fella here, he would spend hours modding these maps. And I remember he and I would pass them back and forth. Mainly he would tell me that there was a new version to download, and so if I wanted to get on the map, I had to download at least the map again, because he had made so many changes to it. And I have to say, he wasn't as fastidious about, like I mentioned at the last video, you can take your save game and you could pull it into the editor and make certain modifications to it so that you keep all your fields and crops intact and everything. Well, that was all. He a lot of times didn't do any of that. So, I mean, I remember one time. Whoa, I'm over 100. I remember one time he had. This was the hard working map, I think, at Farm Sim 15, and he had made numerous changes over and over. And anybody familiar with that map knows there's a ton of logging you have to do to clear the fields, and then we would mow them, then we would plow them, before we could ever get to arable farming. And I cleared the logs out of this field I don't know how many times. And frankly, I was kind of getting frustrated because I had to redo the same field over and over. But I will say it did help me. Did help me work on my motor skills, I guess. For log handling for a while. But he was very fond of doing that. He installed everything under the sun. I mean, everything was fair game. He installed factories. That was a fabric script. New crops. He would change configurations in the fields. I mean, there was just lots and lots, of things that he would do. Let me go to my other tractor here and get him going elsewhere. Let me check. Is he on? Oh, I gotta turn on field detection. Well, I'm gonna be in a pickle. Let me see here. There we go. I come over. Maybe he'll figure it out. I'll just take him along here. But my friend made tons of modifications. He was constantly downloading objects he could import into the map. And one would think that of all people, he should have been able to create a map on his own. And maybe he could. I don't mean to imply here that he couldn't. All I do know is that at the one attempt that I was involved with him, where he was going to do just that, it just didn't work. And I remember he had this idea for a map. I think he lived on the eastern seaboard, and he wanted to make, maybe he'd been in the central part of the U.S. I don't remember those details, but he wanted to make one that was kind of reminiscent of the Midwest part of the country. I think it was going to be called A Taste of Americana, something like that. And this was going to be his magnum opus. This was going to have everything under the sun. It was going to be the map to end all maps, one of those. And we were going to go all out. He and I were going to work together on it and try to put this thing together. And you could tell right at the get-go, I just remember the feeling of, I don't know where he got the landscape. It was relatively flat, but not entirely so. And just going in there and seeing this open canvas of nothing. And he kind of explained, I want to put a crossroad here. Basically, the road network would be this big plus-shaped thing on the map. Kind of a road heading north-south and another road heading east-west. It would have a few curves, on the road, but there were no fields laid out, and it was just blank. And then kind of off in the corner, there was just all these objects, hundreds of them. And, houses and, everything down to, like, the clothesline, that we sometimes see on the maps. And all they needed was somebody to place them. That's all. No big deal, right? Should be no problem, easy peasy. And so we kind of started in the corner. He put down some roads, but he wasn't happy with the look of the roads. And that's something I remember about this person. And he's way more creative, I think, than I am. But creative people seem like they're never satisfied or always are seeking to change something. So I remember we went through several different kinds of asphalt for the road. I don't think he ever did settle on one that he was happy with, for sure. And I think at one point I helped him set up, this was Farm Sim 15. There was a dog, like a guard dog, that had an animated head, and he made noise, growled or barked or something. So I helped him set one of those up, and I think I helped him a little on the roads with some of the sculpting or terraforming, if you will, to get the road to fit in. And then basically nothing happened. And periodically, I'm still somewhat in contact with him. Periodically we'd talk about it, and it just ultimately fizzled. And I really don't know why. The only conclusion I've been able to come to is that it is really a hard thing to do to create a big mod like a map. And kind of like I was mentioning earlier, just the sheer volume of details, that a person has to keep track of in order to do it is just daunting. And, to get all that to the point where, you want to release it. And it'd be interesting talking sometime to an experienced mapper to say, what's your formula for keeping the motivation, if you will, to get all the way through? And, I know for me, one of the first mods that I made under my own name was Rock Spawn for Farm Sim 15, and it's real simple, where you take a cultivator plow and you dig up rocks in the field, and it would put literal rocks on the surface of the map that the player then had to do something with. And one of the things that I did to help me maintain motivation is this was back in the days of the FSUK forum, and they had threads on there for work in process odds. And so if you were trying to make something for the game, you could start your own thread and tell everybody as you made progress on the mod, kind of tell everybody what you were doing, problems you ran into, pictures of it. You could ask for people to help you test, so forth and so on. But when you did that, it was kind of a double-edged sword. You had a ready-made group of people who would stop by and look at what you were doing, and they would give you encouragement. It's like, oh, hey, keep going, man, that looks really cool. Can't wait to download this, when it's done, or those kinds of things. Or they give helpful suggestions sometimes, of things that, maybe you'd never thought of and could build into the mod. And by the same token, it also provided pressure to keep on going. With all these people watching what you were doing, well, if you were going to just quit, now you're disappointing all these people, or you could end up looking like, a buffoon, or maybe not all that. Everybody knows it's just a game. But, that's kind of how I looked at it. I always would have felt funny if I would have just quit, in the middle of it, and it was kind of some induced pressure to keep going. Not that I needed any, but I wasn't doing a map. I was doing a script, which was hard enough in its own right, because, I'm not a computer programmer, and so I was trying to learn how to do Lua, and there's not much documentation. Well, there is documentation on Lua, but as to how it works, in the game, it's pretty hard to get information a lot of times, when you're trying to do something new in a mod, and especially when you're inexperienced, like I was, and didn't even know Lua. It was extremely difficult for me. But the point is that's kind of how I kept up a little my own motivation. So there were, I know one thread I read on their top to bottom, and this happened all before I ever found FSUK, but there was a thread set up for the Feldy map, and I wish before FSUK closed, I had gone in and saved the whole map thread. It was just really cool. All the discussion that they had amongst people that came by just went on for pages and pages. The encouragement, the additional ideas, the progress reports. That's where Farmer Yip, I think, got a lot of his testers and everything. Dr. Hilty would check in. It's one of those things that the forums were just fabulous at. And I know, the forums have kind of gone by the wayside. Can I go back to the... Oh, okay, I gotta go sit. The forums really aren't any longer, if you will. And it's too bad. I really genuinely miss FSUK. It was a good place, and yeah, with the forums, you always have a few ditzels that come through, trolls and whatnot, people who aren't nice or having a bad day and they take them out on others. But there was a ton of good people there too, and at least for me, it was a type of motivation and encouragement, to keep going on a mod. But it was there that I learned who Farmer Yip was. He, by the time I found this map, and there was another friend of mine at the time that recommended it to me to give it a try, and I'm so glad he did, and I took him up on it. This map is just so unique and so ahead of his time. I still continue to believe that I'm glad I was in here. But Farmer Yip by this time was already a legend, if you will, in the farming sim world. And he made another couple maps, I think, after this, and then kind of disappeared from the scene. He's still around, of course, but he hasn't been active in the farm sim modding community. But there were other legends, that would be born on the forum, if you will. Mappers like Bullet Bill, Oxygen David. You know, I'm sure those are names that so many people have heard of. Just stellar mappers, and the level of detail and realism that they put into them, particularly if you're interested in British maps, are just second to none. And I've always appreciated the work of both of those guys. But Oxygen David probably is more prolific of the two. But it would be very interesting indeed to talk to them or another mapper. It's like, how do you maintain your motivation? It's and the thing about map work is, you know, you can sit down in an evening and make a lot of progress on certain things. You know, maybe you're painting foliage or putting in new fields or placing a building, but there sometimes is a ton of work you can put in. Oh, I think I'm going too fast. There's sometimes a lot of work that you do that is so mundane and boring, dull, that it is, I would think, very difficult just to stay motivated to do it. You know, one of them, for example, is some of what I've complained about out in here that is hard for me to do, which is, how do you make a road on a slope that goes on the side of a hill? It's extremely hard. And so you spend a ton of time trying to make a smooth road, and you make very little progress. It's very tedious, time-consuming, and by the time you're done, at least in my case, the end result isn't even very good. You know, there's that kind of thing. Or sometimes there's work that you do in the i3D file in the text editor. You know, maybe you're installing a new crop and something goes wrong, and it's basically like XML code when you open the map file, like in a text editor. You know, it can be just horrible boring, just messing around in there, trying to get things to work the way you need them to work. It isn't all the fun stuff, you know, which to me would be painting fields and placing objects and making it look like a map. So kudos to any mapper or any modder as to however they maintain their motivation to get it all the way through, because we know inherently there's a whole bunch of them who don't, and it's always, you wonder if it's a plea for help. Sometimes you go on a side and you'll even see a modder just admit, hey, I'm sending this out here, it's unfinished, I couldn't figure it out, hopefully somebody else can, but here it is. You know, I respect that, you know, when they say that up front. But then there's a whole bunch of other things too, and I don't know if guys just get tired, but they send it out and it's loads your log file with errors, it doesn't work properly, and you wonder, you know, why did you send that out? That just seems silly. And then I wonder, well, maybe they just got tired. And you know what? We are out of fuel here shortly. And then we're not going to be able to budge an inch. We must have a partial. So anyway, the alarm went off one more time. Alright, we're stuck. Good enough, good enough. I'm going to hit save. And thank you all so much for coming along again as we enjoy Feldy. We've made a little progress on the spuds. Our guys up there tilling dirt. It's a good life. Thank you for coming along, and I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.